Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to see you guys back with us on Living Well another week. Today, we are going to be blessed. I just want to remind everyone before we start that what we do or say here is only for educational purposes only. So we are not doctors. We are only here to give you information from personal experience, biblical experience, or from research. So if you have any personal concerns, best to take it up with your private doctor and go from there. So again, welcome to our Zoom. Today, we have a very special presentation that we are going to do. We're talking about God in the avenues of our soul. You know, when we talk about God in the avenues of our soul, we often talk about the five senses, but today we want to kind of focus on our thoughts. Last week we discussed how to have positive outlook and the importance of having positive thoughts. Next week we are going to emphasize on God in the avenues for souls through emotional intelligence. Understanding our emotions, knowing how to manage our emotions and to recognize other people's emotions can help us manage our relationship with others. Our emotions, self-control, and our beliefs all play a role in achieving richer spiritual relationship with God and our fellow men. God created us with emotion, and He wants us to live have healthy relationship with others, and also as we relate to Him. Today we are going to be watching a video. It's by Dr. Nedley. Dr. Nedley is an internal medicine specialist, and he's the founder and director of the Nedley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program in California. WEMA, I think it's called California. Or the clinic he conducts is called the WEMA Clinic. We are going, before we start, I just want you to know this might take a bit longer, but we think it's so important for you to hear what he have to say. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn my video on and we are going to start.
Well, today we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. And what is this? It's understanding your emotions and the emotions of others and responding to those emotions how? In a healthy way. It sounds pretty simple, but it is involved. There are 5 components of emotional intelligence. The first one is knowing our emotions. This means to be able to not only identify precisely what we are feeling, but why we are feeling that way. And the why cannot be just due to what somebody said to me or what somebody did to me. Because if that's the why, you're not understanding your emotions. Your emotions are actually based on the thoughts that you have about what somebody said or did to you. And the thoughts, we really cannot begin to understand ourselves until we start to analyze our thoughts. And this is something that's very difficult for a lot of people. We have a lot of thoughts throughout the day. And in fact, studies show that you will have a minimum during your waking hours of 5 thoughts per minute. And it can be up to 12 or even more thoughts per minute. Hopefully you'll have more like the 12 thoughts per minute during this time, where you can engage and have your thoughts going in a direction that is going to help us. But 80% of individuals' thoughts today are negative. And 95% of those thoughts are repetitive. And when we do repetitive negative thoughts, it becomes a groove in the brain where it's just easy for things to go that direction. And so it's very important for us to know our emotions. In our 10-day residential program, we have to spend a lot of time on those first few days of actually analyzing our thoughts, because most people aren't used to doing this. They're just used to flying by their what we call NATs, negative automatic thoughts. And they just go with their NATs moment by moment, day by day, not analyzing them. Are those thoughts rational? Are they distorted? If they are distorted, in what way? How can we actually get to true and accurate thoughts? The second part of emotional intelligence is managing our emotions. People with low emotional intelligence are simply managed by their emotions. Moment by moment, day by day, they have powerful emotions, but they're being managed by those emotions. People with high emotional intelligence still have powerful emotions, but they're managing those emotions. Distinctly different. The third part of emotional intelligence is recognizing emotions in others. This is a crucial ingredient and one that comes with empathy. And empathy is a primary characteristic in regards to our emotional intelligence and also managing relationships with others. So emotional intelligence is not just about you, it's about others. And it's about your relationship with others and your ability to understand others and their emotions. And then the fifth aspect is motivating ourselves to achieve our goals. There are people that have high IQ, but they haven't done very well in life, and they've had a lot of problems. And a lot of times it's due to the fact that they haven't had the motivation. You know, even at, we also have a high school, Weimar Academy. You know, we'll have kids with high IQ that don't get straight A's. In fact, they might be a long ways away from straight A's. What's the problem? It's their motivation. It's their emotional intelligence part. And of course, this is why it's important to try to teach emotional intelligence at the primary levels. You know, in our freshman class, it's a general education class for everyone at Weimar to take Optimize Your Brain, to know how to enhance their learning abilities and also to enhance their emotional abilities, because their success in life actually has more to do with their emotional intelligence than it does even their IQ, as important as both are. And you know, when you take a look at these 5 things, you can start seeing how important this is. Even the part managing our emotions. The most quoted researcher in all the world is from an institute that was represented yesterday in my meeting in Oakland, California. And at least U.S. News and World Report ranks this up there, higher than Harvard University now. Anyone know what Ivy League school it's talking about on the West Coast? Stanford. And the most quoted researcher at Stanford is now the most quoted researcher in all the world. His name is Roy Baumeister. He actually teaches in the psychology department there. And he tells us the #1 problem in all the world. And he makes an eloquent case. He's convinced me. The #1 problem in all the world is not talked about by the Democrats. It's not talked about by the Republicans. It's not talked about by the president. It's not talked about even by religious leaders. One of the religious leaders considered the religious leader of the world, came to the United States and spoke to Congress and spoke to stadiums. Never once mentioned the #1 problem. They'll mention problems, but these problems sink into insignificance compared to this problem that Roy Baumeister has identified as the #1 problem in all the world. What is the #1 problem in all the world? It's lack of comprehensive self-control. Lack of self-control. And we're never going to be able to have self-control unless we're able to manage our emotions. If we can't manage our emotions, we're going to be impulsive. We're going to have the lower brain take over. And lack of self-control is actually the #1 cause of heart disease. Because we know how to even reverse heart disease in this country through nutrition and lifestyle. So why is heart disease still the #1 killer in this country? It's not due to the heart per se, it's due to the mind. And it's due to the fact that people aren't incorporating in their lives what they know is healthy for them. Why? They don't have self-control. And so this is an important subject and one that we need to understand more about. In fact, in our 10-day program, we spend a lot of time on those last 3 days getting ready for re-entry, because re-entry is a dangerous time. Their brains are already starting to improve, but they've been given some nice accountability in regards to all the factors that are going to help their brain, but pretty soon they're going to be going back to their own homes and their own environment and their own families and their own work. And are they going to actually be doing the same things that led them to the need for our program? And so that self-control aspect is an important part, and one in regards to the ability to manage our emotions. So improving emotional intelligence, not surprisingly, has been shown in some nice controlled trials to prevent or treat depression, phobias, obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, anorexia, bulimia, and even addictions such as alcoholism, or even the number one addiction in the United States today. Anyone want to know what the number one addiction is in the United States? It's technology addictions. And I tell you, the addiction to smartphones and screens, it is rampant, particularly in Generation Y and Z, but it can happen to the elderly generation as well. And a good section of the elderly are also addicted to their screens. And it actually has some biochemical major disadvantages. There's I'll talk a little bit more about that this afternoon, because I'm having a whole presentation on Optimize Your Brain, on what it does brain chemistry-wise and what we can do about this. But improving emotional intelligence also helps normal people to think clearer, communicate more effectively. It fosters unity in group settings. It reduces polarizing statements. It promotes a happier life. And all of this is accomplished without compromise or sacrificing the truth. It turns out, just like in building a bridge or building an airplane, in building your own brain, truth matters. And truth is extremely important. A lot of people say, well, wait a minute, you talked about unity in group settings. That means we have to put differences aside. That means we have to get to the lowest common denominator, and that means we have to sacrifice truth in order to do that. No. If you sacrifice truth to get to unity, that's a very superficial unity that is going to explode when there's stress that comes into the situation. And so emotional intelligence, one of the bedrock principles, it has to be based on what is truthful and accurate. So the influences on emotional intelligence are many. Our genetic makeup has a role to play. And this is something we measure. When people come to our program, we leave no stone unturned. So we're actually identifying their genetics, not just the way a lot of genetics are identified in the typical psychiatrist's office, where they're just looking at liver genetics on what medicines are going to have the most side effects or interactions. But they're not actually looking at the primary genetic issues that are bringing about the depression and anxiety. And those tests we do, including the epigenetic test. We can see if the gene is there and if it's active. And the nice thing about a lot of genes is we can actually deactivate them through proper nutrition and lifestyle, and maybe taking a supplement or something along that nature, and we can measure it and the gene is no longer active. You have the bad gene, but it's having zero negative activity in regards to that brain. But genetic makeup does have a role to play. And so we look at that genetic makeup. One of the most common genetic issues we'll be discussing tomorrow morning. Actually, we'll discuss several of the common ones, because we're going to be talking about nutrition in the brain. And a lot of this has to do with the nutritional aspect. And so you won't want to miss that. Those that have the calm exterior but tense interior that can be undermethylators. Those that have a high tendency for addictions. Those who have more learning disability issues, and then others who are highly sensitive to all sorts of situations. Normally they have high norepinephrine, low dopamine levels, and there are certain genetic issues that are bringing about this imbalance in the brain. So we don't want to underemphasize this. Genetic makeup can have a role to play, but it's never a sole role. And this is what we'll be demonstrating tomorrow. Childhood experiences have a role to play. By the way, childhood trauma, emotional trauma, do you think that's going up or going down in our society? It's going up considerably. What % of young people today are raised by both biological parents at the same time, from 0 to 18? it's 20% now. 20%. And this is a key ingredient. There's a lot of studies. In fact, in our next Emotional Intelligence Summit, we hold one every year at Weimar. If you want to see what's happening to Weimar, you're all invited. It's the fourth weekend in February where we have our emotional, I think it's the fourth weekend. You'll have to look it up, eqsummit.org. It might be the third. But it's this next one, we are centering in on attachment disorders. Attachment disorders are at an all-time high because it used to be just a normal thing to attach very healthfully to mommy and daddy and to have those attachments produce some sense of security and sense of well-being and a sense of love. That is uncommon today. That's uncommon. And then abuse is at an all-time high. 1 in 4 chance that even a male is going to be sexually abused by the time they're age 18. And it's as high as it is in, that's as high as it is in females. And it used to be lower in both by considerable amounts. And these things have significant scarring and different issues in the brain that we have to get at. And fortunately, neuroplasticity can change those brains for the better as well. So no matter what background you've had, one of the things we talk about, Harvard actually talks about this. Harvard, through their Mastery of Stress study, showed that if you don't have a good relationship with your mother and a good relationship, and you also don't have a good relationship with your father, 9 out of 10 chance you're going to be diagnosed with a major illness by the time you're 50. 90% chance you're going to have a major illness if you don't have a good relationship with both mom and dad. Now, if you have a good relationship with one or the other, it's a coin flip. It's improved to 50%. But if you have a good relationship with both, it's a stark minority. By the way, speaking of science in the Bible, honor thy what? Father and thy mother, that thy what? Days may be long. Harvard has proven that that's true. Science and religion goes hand in hand. But what we talk about is, what if you're in that category where you're only have a 10% chance of avoiding a major mental illness? Let's study that 10%. How did they not come down with a major mental illness? And it has to do with the emotional principles of being able to get on the right program when you have attachment disorders and all of those sorts of things. And so you're not doomed. It's not 100%, praise God. But we can actually have, no matter what the background is, we can actually improve and actually be able to counteract the deficits that occurred at an early age because of our wonderful brains and their ability for neuroplasticity and for those brains to change. Our current level of emotional support has a significant role to play in our emotional intelligence. And then there are physical conditions. Even sleep. If you haven't slept for the last 24 or 48 hours, what do you think happens to your emotional intelligence? Does it go up or go down? It goes down considerably. Poor nutrition. Also, it's going to go down. What you eat does turn into neurotransmitters. It's very important in regards to your brain activity. Illness has a role to play. But for many, not for all, but for many, these factors are of less significance when compared to the next slide. What a major influence on emotional intelligence is for quite a few is our beliefs. Our emotions are largely controlled by our beliefs, our evaluation of events, the way we think about what? Problems, and our silent self-talk. These are the moment-by-moment messages we give ourselves. And this is why we have to get to the thoughts. Your feelings result from your thoughts. They result from the messages you give yourself, which is actually your thoughts. Your thoughts have much more to do with how you feel than what is actually happening in your life. And this is why we have stories like Paul and Silas They were taken against their will. They were doing good to humanity, but they were beaten up for it. Their backs were laid open as they were beaten with rods. Then they were put on a nice, not a nice carpet floor like this. It was an irregular dirt floor with rocks and stones and those type of things in it. Their feet were put up in stocks. And there they were, crying uncontrollably in prison and saying, "Why us, Lord?" The first part of that story was true, but some of you have heard that story. What were they doing? They had happy looks on their faces, singing praises to God. Why is that the case? Because their thoughts had much more to do with how they were feeling than what was actually happening in their life. Now, they weren't thinking fantasy thoughts like, "I'm not here in prison, but I'm at a beach in San Diego." That would have worked for only 1.2 seconds at best, and reality would have come back to them. They were thinking true and accurate thoughts. But those true and accurate thoughts were so powerful that even under the most adverse situation that you could almost imagine, their emotions were managed, and they actually had happy looks on their faces, singing praises to God. So we're going to go through 3 stories.
Okay, so we're going to stop it here. So as we listen to what Dr. Nedley just presented to us, we realize the importance of our thoughts. Thoughts are so embedded in our emotions and how we can react to emotions, so that we have to be very careful of our thoughts. I'm going to stop share here. And Dr. Sankey, we gave you a survey.
So Emilyn, before you do that, I think we should do a little recap of that video, because a lot of good stuff came out of that.
Okay.
So I took notes, and I have a whole page right here. So I think we need to talk a little bit about some of the, and I think we should go to the survey, absolutely. But I think we need to talk about that. What I heard him say was, let me ask the audience, what percentage of our thoughts are negative? I'm going to ask them. Does anybody remember what he said? What percentage? I don't see any hands.
80%.
80%. 80% are negative, and what percent were repetitive? That we keep thinking those negative thoughts over and over again. How many, what percentage? Does anybody remember?
95.
98.
95.
98.
95% of those thoughts are repetitive in their negative thoughts. So think about all the negative stuff that you thought about. Let's reverse it. Think about all the positive things you thought about in the last hour, 24 hours, and think about what's been on your mind. Has it been more positive thoughts or more negative thoughts? So if 80% are negative and 95% are repetitive negative, he calls them gnats, that negative automatic thoughts. Now we have that gnat that's keep on coming, almost like those gnats when you swat them and they just kind of like keep bothering you. So let's think about this week about how do we not only know our emotions, but manage our emotions, and then recognizing the emotions in others. One thing he also mentioned, what is our number one problem that nobody is talking about? Not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not anybody. What was that problem?
Lack of self-control.
Thank you. Lack of self-control. We want what we want, when we want it, how we want it, no matter what. We do not have that control. And he mentioned that heart disease is a result of lack of self-control. And many times we think, oh, they had a heart attack because their high blood pressure was high, their blood pressure was high, or they have diabetes, or they're under stress. But all of that funnels right back to lack of self-control. We are impulsive people, but we can control that. And what I love what he said is we can reverse the way we think. Even though we have genetics, even though we have all kinds of things going on, he called it a neuroplastic, meaning that even though we stretch our brain in the negative, we can actually bring it back into the positive. Isn't that good news? That's great news.
Yep.
That was great, great, great news. The other thing I wrote down here, Emilyn, well, you may have some things that you wrote down. I'm just so busy talking. But one thing he talked about is that that truth matters, and we should not sacrifice truth, even for friends and for family, but we must tell the truth to them because we want to make sure that we are accurate in what we say. So how many times someone tells you a story, and when you tell the story over again, it's not quite the same story that somebody told you. You know, all of us have played that telephone game. And so, you know, on the telephone, by the time it gets to the end of the line, the story is totally different. So let me tell you what my takeaway on that one. We shouldn't gossip, because by the time it gets to the other person and the other person and the other person and the other person, it's no longer true. It is no longer true. So we have to make sure that what we say is true and accurate. So I sent Emilyn something. My dad was a printer, and he made some little cards. And I'm just going to tell you what it says. This is a 4-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. Number 1, is it the truth? So some things we may say are the truth, but number 2, is it fair to all that are concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendship or better relationships? And then number 4, will it be beneficial to all that's concerned? Not just the listener, but the person whom you are referring to. So he gave me this card. I bet I've had this card he made these cards years and years and years ago, but it still has relevance also. Emilyn, anything you want to add to what Dr. Nedley said?
Yeah, I think you went over pretty much everything that I had written down here. You know, he was telling us, going back to thoughts and how we think. 5, you know, every every minute we have 5 to 12 different thoughts that run through our head. When he said that, I was trying to think about all what I'm thinking about. 5 to 12 different thoughts that run through our heads every minute. So you can see how you can easily add up to 95% or 80%, you know, of our thoughts, if not careful, could be negative. And on the fact that, you know, heart disease does kill, it's not because of the heart disease, because we do not have self-control to change, to change our way of eating, to exercise more, or to do those things that we need to do to to reduce the cases of heart disease, because of our choice, not having self-control. And our beliefs, he talks about beliefs also, how important our beliefs are with our thoughts, because our beliefs make up who we are. And it was just amazing that the importance of family, of a mother and a father. When God created the Garden of Eden, he put a man and a woman together, and he also wanted us to be fruitful and multiply. He had a reason why both a mother and father needs to be at the head of the home to guide those children, because he said 20%. Right. If a child does not have a mother or does not have that relationship with a mother and a father, 90% of the chances that they are going to develop a major illness by the time they're 50. Mm-hmm. So as we look around the world today and we see how the incidence of diabetes and all these major problems are just increasing, I would love to do a survey to see exactly how many of these patients really came from broken homes. Maybe that was the cause of why they are now in the state they are in. And if you have one, either or, you have the close relationship, then your chances decrease to 50%. Right. So it's just so crucial for us to build strong family homes, because the home is the starting point for our kids. We are the examples to them, and they learn from us, and then they take that out into society, and they make up the village, and the village makes up the city, and the city makes up the state and the country, and we just, those are some of the things I got from what he said. But the rest of that video is so very powerful. We want to continue it next week.
Yeah, what I found very interesting is that, with only 20% of both mother and father being in the home, that's such a low percentage of having both parents in the home. from the age for 0 up to 18 years old. And so I think that's why our community, when they say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, for that very reason, this actually reinforces the importance of our role with our nieces, our nephews, people in the community, that we play a vital role in making sure that they have good emotional support that's surrounding them, because we know it's very low. But I love when he talked about the story of Paul and Silas. They're in prison for doing the right thing and they're singing. I mean, really? I mean, many times we're doing the right thing. As soon as somebody accuses you of doing right, we're beginning to murmur, complain, and say it's so unjust and so unfair. But again, they were singing praises to God, because even though their condition was unfavorable, they were in adverse conditions, they continued to sing and turn their attention to God. So I thought that was a really, really good story that he started. And there's so many other stories that we want to share with them next week too. But you know, when he talked about the Emotional Intelligence Weekend, did you catch that, Emilyn? It's the first weekend in February. I thought maybe I should look it up, but I know it's out in California. I think it's where Weimar is.
Yeah, Weimar is in California.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you just brought up the story about Paul and Silas, Philippians 4:6-7 came to mind.
Okay.
Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything. By prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God.
Yes.
And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So although Paul and Silas, they were in prison, beaten, with their so skin exposed because of all the lashes that they received, they still gave thanks to God. So in order for them to do that, I'm sure they committed this passage, not to be anxious for anything, but in everything, give thanksgiving to God. Showing gratitude is so very important in helping our emotional intelligence.
You know, something else he mentioned that I found very interesting: people with a high IQ don't necessarily always make A's because they're not motivated towards their goals. And so I think sometimes we say, you know better than that, or we think someone's so smart, but they're not motivated in any way to achieve their goals. They don't have that self-motivation. So, so there's a lot of smart people around, but maybe they're not applying their God-given talents because they're not motivated and they're not managing their emotions with themselves and with others. So again, I think we have to be mindful of that as well. I think, you know, Emilyn, I bet our audience, they may have taken away something that we didn't include. So I think we give them an opportunity just in case we missed something. Does anyone have something to say, or their feelings or thoughts about this video and what you heard today? I would love to hear it. We would love to hear it.
Hi, this is Joycelyn. One of the things that I noted is that we think neurotransmitters are just neurological things, but things like food, the way we think, our belief system and all of that are neurotransmitters. So if we guard against those things, what we listen to, what we look at, and so forth, then we can live better quality lives.
Ooh, that's so true.
Thank you, Joycelyn. Yes, I like what you talk about the nutrition. Very, very important.
Yeah.
That builds a good synapses so that our brain so that we can think clearly and have good thoughts. Yes.
Well, you know, also he mentioned that one of the number one addictions is technology, because our eyes are glued by what we see, what we hear, music, you know, videos. We're constantly engaging with a technological, not a relational with the individual, you know. And so I think that's what we have to be mindful of, that we don't get so connected to our devices that we're on the phone instead of talking to the family, or texting the kid upstairs instead of going upstairs to talk to them, you know, or texting the spouse you're sitting right next to them, you're texting them, you know. So we have to be real careful that we don't let technology interfere with our relationships with others, because many times that's what causes people anxiety, because now I have to talk to somebody, you know, that could be stressful.
Yeah.
Accustomed to talking to someone.
Yeah, because with technology, it's only a one-way communication. It's not that back and forth. It's just that one way. You just absorbing everything and you're not having an opportunity for an output.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Jocelyn, Joycelyn. Yes,
Can you guys hear me?
I can. Yes, how are you, Elder?
Hey, thank you. You know, when you put the Philippians 4, this is what I was thinking. Just a little bit further in verse 8 in Philippians 4, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. So you mentioned the negative thoughts versus the positive thoughts. And when you think of that, what happens? People, I love this thing about trauma. I wonder what the rest of the video would be like, because when you touched on trauma, many people come from, and you know, most of us are aware, everyone is with the ACE, adverse childhood experiences about trauma. Many are understanding that. But let me quickly say the stat about 1 in 5 parents being together growing up. One of the first easy points to get on that study is to have separation of parents, divorce of parents. That is traumatic. So many, now 4 out of 5 are experiencing that. What? And that's just a starting point. So you can predict their futures and health later on. But going further, the thing about how we think, there was so sad I mentioned the number of men or boys, and sadly here the women too, but to see society turn that way. I found when I was an addiction counselor that almost 75% of the men that I had in addiction counseling had been abused as a child. Wow. Never told anybody, went through those things, and they found their own relief in their own attempts to relieve their demons or whatever through drugs and alcohol. Mercy. But coming back to experiences, and so the ultimate part of this, how do we get to how do we think on those things? How do we get to focus on those things? In the midst of trouble and in the midst of the abuses of our past and the troubles that we've had, how does it turn? And I say that there's healing. There's a bomb healing. You know, I'm going to make the plug for Evidence Recovery Ministries, because I say the 12 steps don't change the past, it changes the way we look at the past. And when you change the way you look at the past has less power over you. It has less, you know, you no longer react. You now have your own chances to face something with a neutral start, as opposed to always carrying this weight of the past that you carry. With that, it's not that easy. I'm sure Dr. Nedley talks more about it. It's awesome in all these different topics on mental health and all different things he talks about. I just want to say that that's one of the things we can do. We can go to work, and how do we heal? How is it possible to heal? We know God wants us to heal. What's the place that He has for that to take place? And I just mentioned Evidence Recovery Ministries because I believe those 12 steps are just that. The book Steps to Christ mirror those 12 steps. And that recovery edition is definitely a must-have. So we can recover, so we can then go forward. Because we keep trying to go forward without having loosened our weights and let the weights go from behind us. So then we're constantly to the 3rd and 4th generations passing it down and passing it down and passing it down, and everyone wonders why that family is that way. But actually,
thank you, Elder. I appreciate that. You know what? I think everybody should have a homework assignment this week, Emilyn. I think we should all memorize Philippians 4:8.
Yes.
I think that should be our homework assignment. So some people may already have it memorized, they know it by heart, but we know parts of it, but we want to know all of it. So that way, when we're engaging in conversations with people, about anything, we can just begin to recite it in our mind and out loud so that we can say whatever's true. So it may be true, but it may not be of a good report. So we need not say those things, right? So I think that's our assignment this week is Philippians 4:8. I would encourage all of us, because we believe that when we spend this time on this platform, we're led by God to bring all of us up to a higher level. Emilyn and I pray daily about this. We pray about it because we want to make sure that the information we're providing is getting us closer to the kingdom of God. So this is what we're trying to do. So I would say yes, Elder?
Yes.
So
I want to say that you see the Mount Calvary SDA Daytona Beach, because I told you I was working include the Living Well program into our Sabbath afternoon for the church. So we'll be turning in every, God willing, from this point forward. That's why you know this is our first week starting.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your support. So everybody on board with Philippians, if you're on board with me for Philippians 4:8, that you're going to memorize it this week, or you're going to try by God's grace to memorize it, use your little icon and put a little thumbs up that you're going to do it. We want to see those who are on board. This is our call to action today. So let's see those who are on board to I'm trying to find my little icon here. Here we are. I'm good. This is my little icon. Okay, let's see. We got some thumbs going up. All right. Philippians 4:8. Philippians 4:8. We're going to start today because we want to make sure that the words of our mouth and the meditation of our heart is acceptable in the sight of God. And so again, what Dr. Nedley talked about today, it begins in our thoughts. He said, if we know our emotions, we manage our emotions, we recognize the emotions in others, meaning that we need to be sensitive to the emotions of others, what we say to them, how we say it, manage our relationship with others, and then motivate ourselves to achieve our goals. So what I've put into the chat is I put the self-assessment. If you didn't get a chance to do it last week, I would encourage you this week, as you have time, to take a moment to look through the questions. We won't have time now, Emilyn, because I took up most of the time talking about a recap. But I would encourage you to begin to just quietly sit, take the assessment. It will help you see where you are as it relates to your outlook. So Emilyn, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thanks again. As I cannot stop emphasizing the importance of our thoughts. All right. The only reason why Paul and Silas were able to go through what they went through was because they had a relationship with God and they allowed him to control their thoughts and the whole being. So as we go through this coming week, let us remember that we put God first, that we have constantly reminding ourselves who we are. We are the children or child of God. And because of that, we know we have a creator who loves us so very much that whatever we ask, he is there willing and waiting to help us and to give us whatever he sees best for us. And many times when we pray, just believe that God has answered prayers. Maybe that might not be the way we want it to be, but he does answer prayers. So let us, as Dr. Sankey said, Philippians 4:8. One of the ways I get through life is by stating memory verses that I learned from when I was a child. Those things have stuck with me. So if we can start memorizing memory verses, passages of the Bible, it will be so helpful for when the time of trials, when temptation comes, we can fight off the devil's temptation, because the devil knows his time is short and he is trying to get each and every one of us down with him. So let us stay faithful, stay true to our thoughts, because we need to be true to our thoughts. When things come up in our minds, let us think, is it something pure? Is it just? Is it wholesome? And analyze it that way so we can start keeping positive thoughts in our heads, because as the speaker said, Dr. Nedley, that when we start with these negative thoughts, it makes a pathway in our brain that we can easily, go to all the time. Because when something is weak, we tend to go to that area. But when we can strengthen our minds, our thoughts, pure, positive thoughts, we will be able to be so much better and be able to help others. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming on, and hope to see you next week.